Every man who ever tried to destroy the Shelbys made the same mistake. They watched Tommy, they watched Arthur's fists, and Polly's eyes, and the razors in the caps. And while they watched the dangerous ones, a woman with a book in her lap and a child on her hip walked straight through the middle of them, and nobody thought to stop her, because she was only Ada. Now look at her properly. Because in the world we are about to build, Ada Shelby is the one who finally understands a truth her brother never could. You cannot shoot a government. You cannot cut the throat of a system. And the real power that has been strangling her family for years was never a man with a gun. It was a quiet room, a locked ledger, and a gentleman who never once got his hands dirty. It was Section D. This is the story of what happens when the one person nobody in the British establishment ever bothered to fear decides to take apart the machine that beat Tommy Shelby every single time, not with a razor, but with the one weapon the powerful cannot survive. The truth about how their power actually works. Stay with me, because what begins as a sister quietly reading other people's letters becomes something the crown itself has no defense against. And by the end, this is not really a story about Birmingham at all. It is a story about who truly holds power in your world, and why the ones who see it clearly are the only people the powerful have ever been afraid of. Let us begin with the thing that is true, the real fact the whole story stands on. The Shelbys were never beaten by other criminals. Sit with that, because it matters. Sabini, the Italians, the razors in the dark, those were street wars, and the Shelbys won the street. Every time. What broke them, again and again, was not a rival gang. It was the state. A police inspector sent from Belfast with the full blessing of Winston Churchill. A quiet threat from a government office. A pardon dangled, and then withdrawn. The Shelbys could beat any man who came at them with a weapon. What they could never beat was the thing that had no face. The polite, patient machinery of the British establishment, which used them when it needed dirty work and discarded them when it was done. Section D was that machinery given a name. A secret intelligence section, buried inside the government, dealing in blackmail and manipulation and quiet murder, the kind of work that never appears in any newspaper, carried out by men who wear good suits and go home to country houses. This was the real enemy. And here is the part that will run through this entire video like a wire pulled tight. Every Shelby fought it the wrong way. Tommy tried to become useful to it. Arthur tried to outfight it. Polly tried to out-scheme it. And all of them lost, because you cannot beat a structure by playing the game the structure invented. Only Ada ever looked at it differently. Because Ada had read the books the others never opened. Ada had stood in union halls and listened to men explain that power is not a person. It is a shape, a system, a set of hidden hands. Her communism, which the family treated as a girlish embarrassment, was in truth the only political education anyone in that family ever received. Tommy understood men, Ada understood power, and those are not the same thing at all. So watch what happens when the woman who understands power rather than men decides to move against the one enemy her whole family kept losing to. Watch the underestimated one pick up the only weapon that ever actually worked. Put yourself inside her head for a moment, because it is a colder and clearer place than you expect. Ada Shelby sits in a government office because in this world, that is exactly where she ends up. A clever woman given a small, deliberately powerless job inside the very intelligent service that has been bleeding her family. They put her there, thinking she was tamed. A Shelby they had house-trained. A widow who needed the wage. Harmless. And that, you will learn, is the single most dangerous thing you can ever say about a person. Harmless. Because Ada does what no Shelby with a gun could ever do. She reads. She files. She notices which letters cross which desks, which names appear beside which sums of money, which country house hosted which minister, the weekend before a policy changed. Where Tommy would walk into a room and measure the men, Ada walks into an archive and measures the connections between them. And slowly, page by page, in the dull gray light of a filing room nobody thinks to guard, she begins to see the shape of the thing. Not a gang, not a boss, a web. A quiet, interlocking web of gentlemen who own the banks that fund the papers, that shape the votes, that appoint the ministers that command the very intelligence service she is sitting inside. Ask yourself honestly, right now, before we go further. If you could see the real machinery of power in your own world, who truly owns what? Who really decides? Would you want to know? Or is there a reason most people keep their eyes on the loud, dangerous men at the front, and never on the quiet ones who sign the checks? Hold that question. Because Ada is about to learn why the powerful can survive any number of gangsters, but cannot survive a single clerk who understands the filing system. Let us watch the exact moment it begins, because power never falls to a grand gesture. It falls, when it falls at all, to one small thread pulled loose. And Ada's thread is almost laughably ordinary. It is a discrepancy, a tiny one. A payment recorded in one ledger that does not appear in another, a sum that leaves a government account marked as expenses and arrives somewhere it has no business arriving. Any other clerk would file it, and forget it would assume an error, a rounding, a thing above their station to question. That is what the system counts on. It survives on the assumption that the small people who handle its paper will never do the one dangerous thing: follow the money to the end of the road. Ada follows it. On her own time, in the gray hour before the office fills, she pulls the next file, and the next. And the discrepancy is not an error. It is a shape. The money that vanishes from one account reappears, cleaned and quiet, funding a thing that funds a thing that ends. 3 careful steps later, in the pocket of a newspaper, the very newspaper that, 6 weeks ago, ran the story that ruined a man the government wanted ruined. She is holding, in her ordinary hands, the physical proof that a secret arm of the state pays to shape what the public is allowed to believe. Sit inside that morning with her. The dust in the light. The tea, going cold. The slow, cold horror of a clever woman realizing that the thing she is looking at is not a crime hidden inside a decent system. It is the system working exactly as designed, and the decency was the disguise. This is the moment the world rearranges itself behind Ada's eyes. Before this morning she believed, like most people believe, that the corruption was the exception. After it, she understands the far darker truth, that the corruption is the machine, and the honest parts are the paint on its surface. And notice what she does not do, because it is the first sign that she is a different kind of dangerous. She does not gasp. She does not run to Tommy. She does not even take the file. She reads it twice, until she has it whole in her mind, and then she puts it back exactly where it was, squares the edges, and goes to make a fresh pot of tea. Because Ada has understood, in a single morning, the first rule of fighting a machine that watches everything. You must let it keep believing you are furniture. The clerk who understood the ledger has just decided to become the most patient enemy the British establishment has ever had. And not one soul in that building has any idea it has happened. Every good story needs a face for the enemy. And so does this one. But the horror of Ada's enemy is precisely that he barely has one. Let us call him the gentleman behind Section D. He is not Campbell. Campbell was a dog on a leash, and even Campbell knew it. Our gentleman is the hand that held Campbell's leash, an establishment figure of the kind that never appears in the story of the Shelbys at all, because men like him are never in the story. They own the story. Picture him, a member of 3 clubs, a seat that is not quite in the government and not quite out of it, a man who has never once raised his voice because he has never once needed to. When he wants a rival ruined, a word is spoken at dinner, and a bank calls in a loan the next morning. When he wants a man dead, he does not order it. He simply mentions that it would be convenient, and somewhere downstream a person like Tommy Shelby is handed a gun and a reason. He has killed more men than Arthur ever will, and he has never touched a weapon in his life. His hands are clean because other people's hands are dirty on his behalf. This is the man Tommy could never reach, because Tommy kept fighting the leash instead of the hand. You can kill a Campbell, and another one arrives on the next train from Belfast. The gentleman simply orders a new dog. That is the whole tragedy of the Shelby Wars, and it is real. They spent years bleeding to defeat the visible pieces of a machine whose owner they never even saw. But Ada sees him. Ada, in her gray filing room, follows the paper until the paper stops, and the place where the paper stops, the name that appears on nothing and behind everything, is him. And here is the aphorism to carry with you. A man who is never named is a man who has never been threatened. Ada has just found the one thing his entire power depended on him: never losing. She has found his name, but she does not find that name alone. She finds it in the papers of a dead man, and that dead man is the most tragic figure in this whole story, because he understood the machine better than any Shelby ever did, and it destroyed him anyway. Major Campbell, the inspector from Belfast. The man the family remembers as a cruel, twisted enemy, and he was that. But look closer at what Campbell truly was, because Ada does, and it changes how she sees her own danger. Campbell was not the power. Campbell was the dog. A clever, vicious, useful dog who did the establishment's filthy work in Birmingham and believed, right up until the end, that his service would earn him a place at the table. It never could. Men like the gentleman do not give dogs a seat. They give dogs a task, and when the task is done, or when the dog becomes inconvenient, they let it be put down and they feel nothing at all. And here is the thing Ada discovers that no one expected. Campbell knew. Somewhere in his cold, bitter heart, the dog understood exactly what he was, and like every intelligent servant of a merciless master, he kept insurance. A private file, a record hidden away, of every filthy order he was ever given, and every clean hand that gave it, not out of conscience, out of fear. Because a man who does the dirty work of gentlemen knows, in his bones, that one day they will need him to disappear, and he wants something in his coat that makes him too expensive to kill. Ada finds that file, and in it, in the dead man's own careful hand, is the whole architecture, the orders, the payments, the name that signs nothing and commands everything. Listen to the voice of the dog, written for no one, meant only as a shield.
Let it be recorded by my hand that I acted always upon instruction, and that the instruction came always from the same quarter, though that quarter has taken great care to leave no mark. If I am found in a ditch, look to the gentleman who dined at the club on the nights these orders were given. He has never held a weapon. He has never needed to. He has only ever needed men like me, and a short memory in the men who bury us.
Feel the cold irony of it. Campbell spent his life serving the machine and hating the Shelbys, and now his final act, a spiteful, self-protecting file kept by a frightened dog, becomes the very key that a Shelby uses to bring the machine down. The man who tormented Ada's family hands Ada, from beyond the grave, the map she needs. Not because he repented, because he understood his masters exactly well enough to fear them, and not 1 inch well enough to escape them. And here is what Ada takes from the dead man's papers, the lesson that will keep her alive where he died. Campbell had the truth, and it did not save him, because Campbell tried to use it the way a dog uses a bone, privately, as leverage, as a threat whispered to his master in the dark. He went to the gentleman with what he knew, and tried to trade it for safety. And that is exactly why he ended in a box. A secret held privately is a leash you hand to the very man you are trying to threaten. Ada will not make Campbell's mistake. She will not whisper the truth to power and beg for a place. She will do the one thing a frightened dog could never imagine. She will let go of the leash entirely and give the truth to everyone at once. Now understand what Ada actually has, because it is not what you think. She does not have a gun aimed at the gentleman. She has something far worse for a man like him. She has the truth about how he works, and, crucially, she has the proof. Sitting in the very archive they were foolish enough to let her tidy. Watch the logic of it unfold, because this is the engine of the whole story. A man like Tommy, if he learned the gentleman's name, would do the Shelby thing. He would arrange a meeting. He would make a threat. He would try to trade. And the gentleman would smile, because that is a game he wins in his sleep, the game of dangerous men wanting something. Threats are a currency, he prints. A gangster with a secret is simply a business opportunity. You buy him, or you have him killed. And either way, the secret dies with the transaction. But Ada does not want anything. And a person who wants nothing is the one kind of enemy the powerful have no move against. She does not want money. You cannot buy her silence, because she is not selling silence. She does not want a seat at the table. You cannot promote her into loyalty, because she despises the table itself. What Ada wants is for the machine to be seen, and the one thing a hidden hand cannot survive is being seen clearly by enough people at once. So picture her plan, which is nothing like a Shelby plan. No razors, no ambush. Ada takes the proof, the ledgers, the letters, the map of who owns whom, and she does not sell it to the gentleman. She does not even threaten him with it. She begins, quietly, patiently, to place it where the structure cannot reach. With the union men who already suspect, with the honest journalists the gentleman does not yet own, with the members of parliament whose careers he has not yet bought. She is not planting a bomb. She is planting a picture of the machine in 100 minds at once, so that no single death, no single bought editor, no single quiet word at dinner can ever unsee it again. That is the weapon. Not a bullet, which kills one man and changes nothing, but a truth spread wide enough that killing the messenger only proves the message. So begins the one war against the establishment that the establishment was never built to fight. Let us pause here on Tommy, because the contrast is the whole point, and it is the most human part of the story. Tommy Shelby is a genius. Do not mistake this video for a story about a foolish man. Tommy is the cleverest gangster in England, but his genius is a genius of men. Put a dangerous person in front of Tommy, and he will read their fear, their hunger, their weakness, and he will own them by morning. That is a magnificent gift, and it is exactly why he keeps losing to Section D, because Section D is not a person. It has no fear for him to read, no hunger for him to feed. It is a shape, and Tommy has spent his whole life learning to fight faces. Watch a scene that never happened but should have. Ada comes to Tommy with what she has found, and instead of understanding, he does the thing that has always kept him alive and always kept him trapped.
Give me the name, Ada. One name. I'll deal with it the way I deal with everything.
That's exactly the problem, Tom. You want a name because you want a man. A man you can meet, or buy, or bury. But there is no man. There's a machine. And you've spent 10 years polishing the parts of it that pointed at you, thinking you were winning. Kill the name I give you, and next month there's another gentleman in another club, and you're back on your knees doing his dirty work and calling it business.
And your way is better. Letters, newspapers, reading rooms full of clever men who've never held a gun.
My way is the only way that's ever frightened them, Tommy. Guns don't frighten these people. They own the men with guns. What frightens them is a room full of ordinary people who can suddenly see exactly how they're being robbed. You've been trying to win their game. I'm going to end it.
Sit with that exchange, because it holds the thesis of the entire story in a single conversation. Tommy's instinct, meet the man, deal with the man, is the very instinct that has kept the machine safe. The machine wants to be fought by Tommies. It has 100 years of practice beating men who want a name. What it has never faced, not once, is someone who refuses to play the game of names at all. And here's the quiet, devastating truth of this chapter. The reason the Shelbys kept losing was never that they weren't dangerous enough. It was that they were the right kind of dangerous for the wrong kind of enemy. Ada is the wrong kind of dangerous. Which is to say, she is the only kind that could ever work. Do not imagine, though, that Ada's path is clean, simply because it does not begin with a razor. This is where the story turns darker, and where you should lean in. Because the price of Ada's war is not paid in the way a Shelby usually pays. Understand what she is truly doing. She is taking on not a gang, not a rival, but the entire quiet architecture of who is allowed to know things in England. And an architecture like that does not send men with guns to her door. That would be crude, and crude leaves evidence. Instead, it does what it has always done. It begins to make her disappear while she is still standing in the room. Watch how it works, because it is more frightening than any ambush. First, the small things. The wage that stops. The landlord who is suddenly, apologetically, in need of the flat. The old friend in the union who grows nervous and stops returning her letters because a quiet man visited his workplace and mentioned his family by name. The gentleman does not threaten Ada. He simply removes, one by one, the ground she stands on until a woman who was building a case finds herself with no income, no home, no allies, and a whisper following her everywhere that she is unstable. A communist, a hysteric, a woman not to be believed. This is how the machine kills the ones it cannot buy. Not with a bullet, with erasure. It makes you unbelievable, and then it lets your own truth strangle in your throat. And here's the cruelest turn of all, the one that makes Ada's war so much lonelier than Tommy's ever was. When a man comes for Tommy with a gun, the whole family rallies, because that is a danger they understand, a danger with a face. But when the danger is a stopped wage, and a whispered word, and a slow, patient erasure, even her own family begins to doubt her. Even Polly, who misses nothing, starts to wonder if Ada has taken on something that isn't real, something in her own head. Because the machine's greatest trick is that its violence is invisible, and invisible violence makes the victim look mad.
Ada, love, look at yourself. No wage, no home, jumping at every man in a grey coat. There's no gang, there's no war, there's just you, spinning a web out of filing cabinets and frightening yourself half to death.
That's what it needs you to think, Paul. That's the whole design. If they sent men with razors, you'd believe me in a heartbeat and we'd all pick up our guns. So they don't send razors. They send silence and doubt and a quiet word to my landlord, and they let the people who love me decide I've lost my mind. The fact that you can't see the war is not proof there isn't one. It's proof of how good they are at it.
Hold there, because Ada has just named the deepest horror of fighting real power. The better a machine is at hiding, the more insane you sound describing it. Tommy's enemies made him bleed. Ada's enemy makes her doubt her own eyes, and makes everyone she loves doubt them too. That is a far lonelier war, and she is fighting it almost entirely alone. Now, let us widen the lens, because it is worth asking why it had to be Ada. Why this particular Shelby, of all of them, is the one who can see the machine. And the answer tells you something true about who actually sees power in any world. Ada is three things the establishment never takes seriously, and each one is a kind of invisibility that becomes, in this story, a kind of armor. She is a woman, and so the gentlemen speak freely in front of her. The way powerful men have always spoken freely in front of women they have decided do not count. She is a widow with a child, and so she has a reason to need a dull, quiet job, and a reason to be underestimated as merely surviving. And she is a reader, a communist, a woman who understands that history is not made by great men, but by structures, classes, and the movement of money. Each of these made her, in the family's eyes, the least of the Shelbys. And each of these is precisely what let her walk into the one room no other Shelby could ever enter, and understand what she found there. This is the great inversion at the heart of the story, and you should feel its edge. The very qualities that made Ada dismissed her womanhood, her politics, her quiet domestic life, are the qualities that made her lethal to a kind of power that had armored itself against everything else. The gentleman behind Section D had defenses against ambitious men, against rival aristocrats, against dangerous gangsters, against foreign spies. He had no defense whatsoever against a clever woman he had decided was furniture. He built a fortress with one door, and he left that door open because he could not imagine that the person standing in it mattered. Take that out of Birmingham for a moment, and into your own life. The people who truly understand how a system works are almost never the loud ones at the top of it. They are the clerks, the secretaries, the underpaid, the overlooked, the ones who process the paperwork of power and are assumed to be too small to notice what passes through their hands. Every institution is transparent to the people it considers beneath its attention. Ada is the proof. And the powerful have never fully solved this problem, because to solve it, they would have to start respecting the very people their power depends on ignoring. Here the story tightens, because Ada now faces a temptation, and how she answers it is the difference between winning Tommy's way and winning her own. She could, at any moment, simply hand the whole thing to her brothers. Give Tommy the name. Let Arthur and the Peaky Blinders do what they do. Turn her cold, patient, structural war into a hot, bloody, familiar Shelby war. And God knows it would feel good. After the stopped wages and the whispers and her own aunt calling her mad, the temptation to just point her dangerous family at the gentleman's throat is enormous. You would feel it too. Watch her refuse it and understand why, because this is the moral spine of the whole video.
Just say the word, Ada. Whoever's doing this to you, to a Shelby, me and the lads will pay him a visit he won't walk away from. Nobody frightens my sister. Nobody.
I know, Arthur, and I love you for it. But if you visit him, you lose, don't you see? The moment a Shelby with a razor turns up at that man's door, I stop being a clerk with the truth, and I become exactly what he's been telling everyone. I am a gangster's mad sister, settling a gangland score. You wouldn't be defending me. You'd be proving him right. The only way to beat a man who kills with respectability is to be more respectable than him. And a body in the Thames is the one thing that can turn his lie into the truth.
Feel the weight of that, because it is the hardest thing in the story. Ada has a loyal, lethal family desperate to protect her, and she has to hold them back, because their love, unleashed, would hand her enemy the victory. The machine wants a body it can point to, a body that turns, look at the corruption these men are hiding, into look at the violence these criminals commit. The single most dangerous thing Ada can do is nothing that looks like crime. Her weapon only works if her hands stay cleaner, in the end, than the gentleman's. And so she wages a Shelby war with no Shelby weapons. No razors, no ambush, no revenge. Only the slow, disciplined, agonizing work of making the invisible visible, while every instinct in her blood screams at her to simply let Arthur solve it in an alley. That restraint, that refusal to become what the machine needs her to be, is the bravest thing any Shelby ever does, and nobody will ever make a legend of it, because it happened in a filing room and a reading hall, and legends are only ever made of blood. So how does one ordinary woman actually set light to 100 years of darkness? Not alone, and this is the part that matters, because it is the opposite of everything the Shelbys ever believed about power. Tommy always believed power was a thing you held in your own hands, alone, by being harder than the next man. Ada is about to prove that real, lasting power is the one thing you cannot hold alone. You can only hand it to others and trust it to spread. Watch her find the first honest journalist. Not a famous one. The famous ones are already owned, their strings already held. She finds a young woman writing for a small, poor, stubborn paper that no gentleman has yet bothered to buy, because it seemed too small to matter. And Ada does not arrive with a scandal or a plea. She arrives with something a real journalist cannot resist, a checkable fact, and then another, and then the thread that ties them.
I'm not asking you to trust me. Trusting a Shelby would make you a fool. I'm asking you to check this payment on this date, from this account, that contract, that week, to that man. Every fact I'm giving you can be proven without me. I don't want my name anywhere near it. I want the facts to stand on their own 2 feet, so that when they come for whoever printed them, there's nothing to attack but the truth itself. Burn me if you like, but check the ledger first.
Understand the genius buried in that, because it is the whole strategy in miniature. Ada makes herself irrelevant to her own weapon. A scandal that depends on a source can be killed. By killing the source, discredit the witness, and the story dies with her. But a scandal built entirely from checkable, public, provable facts has no throat to cut. You cannot murder a bank record. You cannot blackmail a date. Ada has designed a truth that does not need her to survive, and a truth that does not need its teller is the only kind the powerful cannot kill. And so it begins to spread, the way fire spreads through dry kindling, not from one great blaze, but from 100 small catches. The young journalist prints the facts, carefully, without a single accusation, letting the reader draw the line. A union paper reprints them. A pamphlet carries them into factories. A school teacher reads them aloud. And each person who receives the picture becomes, themselves, a place the fire can jump to, because the facts are theirs now, checkable in their own hands, impossible to unlearn. Ada is not shouting into the dark. She is teaching the dark to see. And a machine that survived a century of being attacked has no idea what to do about being, quietly and everywhere, simply understood. But before the fire catches, there is a night that nearly ends it all, and it is not the gentleman who almost stops Ada. It is love. It is her own family, and the doubt that the machine so carefully planted, coming to a head in a single kitchen. Because by now, Ada has lost nearly everything the visible world measures. The wage, the flat, the friends who grew afraid, and to a family that measures danger in blood and territory, she looks not like a warrior, but like a woman coming apart, obsessed with paper, hunted by no one they can see, insisting on a war that leaves no bodies. And so Polly, who loves her, does the cruelest kind thing. She tries to save Ada from herself.
I buried a version of myself once, Ada, chasing something that ate me alive. I watched it hollow me out, and I see the same thing in you now. No home, no money, reading ledgers till dawn, flinching at shadows. Let it go, love. Whatever this is, come home. There's no war a Shelby ever won with a filing cabinet.
You buried yourself fighting men, pole men you could see, men with faces, and you nearly died of it. I'm fighting the thing that sent those men. You call it shadows because it's built to look like shadows. But every shadow I flinched at was real. The wage didn't stop by accident. The landlord wasn't sorry. They are raising me slowly, precisely so that you, the sharpest woman I know, will sit in this kitchen and tell me it isn't happening. If they can turn you against me, they've won without lifting a hand. So look at me, Paul. Really look. Do I sound mad? Or do I sound like the only one who finally understood the war we've been losing for 10 years?
And here is the turn that saves everything, because Polly Gray has one gift above all others. She has been underestimated her entire life, and she knows exactly what it feels like to be called mad by people too comfortable to see. She looks at Ada, really looks, and she recognizes, in her niece's exhausted, unbroken eyes, not hysteria, but the specific, lonely clarity of a woman who is right, and alone in being right. And Polly does the thing that turns a lone clerk into a force. She believes her.
Right. Then you'll not do it starving in a cold room like a martyr. You've got the sight, Ada, God help you, you always did. But you've got no cover, and covering the ones who can't cover themselves, that I know how to do. Tell me who's watching you. Let's make them watch the wrong door.
That is the moment Ada stops being alone. Not an army, not razors. Just one more pair of eyes that finally sees the machine, and in this story, that is worth more than all the guns in Small Heath. Because the machine's whole defense was isolation. Make her unbelievable. Make her lonely. Let her own family bury her. The instant one person she loves believes her, that defense cracks. And it will keep cracking, one believing mind at a time, until the light gets in. Now the tide begins to turn. And here is where you should feel the whole thing start to move the scale, widening from one woman to something that shakes a nation. Because Ada's picture is spreading. Slowly at first. A union paper prints something careful and specific. Not a rant about the rich, but a map. This bank, that minister, this loan, that policy, this contract, awarded the week after that dinner. Then a second paper, braver, prints more. Then, a young member of Parliament, ambitious and not yet owned, stands up and asks a question in the House that he should not know how to ask a question with names in it, and dates, and the precise mechanism of a favor. And for the first time, in the gentleman's long and comfortable life, something happens that has never happened before. People begin to look at the machine, and see a machine, where before they saw only the natural order of things. Watch what this does to power, because it is the reverse of everything the Shelbys ever experienced. When Tommy attacked the establishment closed ranks, because an attack by a gangster frightens the powerful into unity. But Ada is not attacking. She is illuminating, and illumination does something to a web of quiet men that no attack ever could. It makes them afraid of each other. Suddenly, every gentleman in every club is wondering which of his friends has been named, which loan is about to become public, whose downfall he should distance himself from before the light reaches him too. The machine's greatest strength was always its invisibility, its assumption of permanence. Ada has not smashed it. She has switched on a light in a room full of men who only ever felt safe in the dark. And the gentleman behind Section D, for the first time, makes a mistake, because frightened power always does. He reaches for the old tools, the whisper, the ruined reputation, the quiet removal, and finds that they no longer work the way they used to. You cannot make a woman disappear once 100,000 readers know her name and know why she matters. You cannot discredit her as a hysteric once the specific, checkable facts she pointed to keep turning out to be true. Every weapon he uses against her now only draws more light to the exact thing he is trying to hide. He is a man built entirely for darkness, thrashing in the first daylight he has ever known. And he is starting to lose. And so the gentleman does the one thing he has never, in his entire life, had to do. He asks to meet the clerk. He steps out of the shadow himself, and the moment he does, he has already lost, because his whole power was the shadow. Understand how enormous this is. This is a man who has ruined ministers without ever being in the room, who has ended men with a sentence spoken to someone else. He has spent 40 years making certain that no problem was ever big enough to require his own face. And now a widow from Small Heath with a library card has become a problem he cannot delegate, because every man he would normally send is now afraid of being named himself. So he comes in person to a quiet room, expecting to do what has always worked, to find the price. Because in his world, everyone has a price, and the only skill that matters is knowing whether to pay it or remove it. Watch the scene, because it is the whole thesis of the video pressed into a single conversation. He is charming. He is reasonable. He offers her everything a frightened, ruined woman should want: the wage restored, a fine home, security for her child, a comfortable future, all of it, in exchange for the simple, sensible surrender of a set of papers and a promise of silence.
You've come yourself. Do you know, in 10 years, my brother never once got you in a room. He tried everything: guns, money, threats, deals, and he never had to so much as learn his name. And here you are, in the flesh, sitting across from me because I did the one thing he never could. I stopped trying to beat you, and I started trying to show you you've brought a price. I can see it on you. You think I've done all this to be bought, that the wage and the house are what I've been fighting for, and now you'll pay them and I'll go quiet. But I don't want anything, and that's the one thing you have no answer for. You can buy a man who wants a seat. You can bury a man who wants revenge. But I don't want your table, and I don't want your blood. I want 10,000 ordinary people to see exactly what you are. And you cannot buy that back, and you cannot kill your way out of it, because it isn't in me anymore. It's already out there, in their hands, and it's spreading whether I live or die. You came here to find my price. I asked you here so you'd finally understand that I haven't got one.
Feel the ground open under him. A man whose entire life was built on the certainty that everyone, can be paid or removed, sitting across from the first person who is genuinely immune to both, because she has arranged to want nothing he can give, and to be nothing he can destroy. He came to close a transaction. He discovers there is no transaction to close, and for the first time in his long, clean-handed life, the gentleman feels the specific terror of the powerful when they meet someone who cannot be bought and cannot be frightened. The terror of a man who has just realized that all his weapons were only ever aimed at people who wanted to survive. He leaves that room a smaller man than he entered it. Not beaten yet, men like him are never beaten in a single stroke. But he has looked into the one kind of enemy his world cannot process, and he has understood that the game he has always won is a game she simply refused to play. That is Ada's true victory, and it happens with no weapon at all. She made the invisible man visible, sat him down, and let him discover that his power was only ever a mirror it could reflect other people's fear and greed back at them. And against a woman who brought neither, it showed him nothing but himself. But we are honest storytellers here, and so we must play both endings to their conclusion, the dark one and the hopeful one, because both are true, and the space between them is where the real meaning lies. Here is the dark ending. Ada wins the battle, and the machine survives the war. She brings the gentleman down, his name ruined, his web exposed, a scandal that fills the papers for a season. And the establishment does what it has always done with a wound. It sacrifices the wounded part to save the body. The gentleman is quietly retired, disowned, perhaps even prosecuted. And the clubs and the banks and the ministers all agree, sadly, that he was a bad apple, an exception, a regrettable individual. And the machine grinds on exactly as before, now with the added strength of having proven it can police itself. Ada learns the oldest, cruelest lesson of all, that a system is very willing to feed you one guilty man in order to protect the guilty structure, and that exposing a villain and exposing a machine are not the same thing. She took out the power behind Section D, and Section D found a new power by Christmas. And then the hopeful ending, which is quieter and harder and truer than any gangland triumph. Because even in the dark version, something has changed that cannot change back. Ada has taught 100,000 people to see, and sight, once given, is very hard to take away. The Union man who read the map now reads every map. The young MP who asked one dangerous question has learned that questions are a weapon the powerful genuinely fear. Ada did not destroy the machine. Perhaps no single person ever can, but she did something the machine has no defense against in the long run. She made it visible to the people it depends on, and a machine that can be seen is a machine that can, eventually, be dismantled. Not by a razor, by a rising tide of ordinary eyes that have learned where to look. Her victory is not a body in the river. It is a change in what people are able to see. And that is the only kind of victory that ever actually lasts. Feel the difference between these two endings, because it is the difference between how a gangster wins and how a movement wins. Tommy's victories were always total and always temporary. A rival dead, a territory taken, and then the same war again next year. Ada's victory is partial and permanent. She does not get the clean triumph. She gets the thing that matters more. She moves the line of what people can see, and the line does not move back. So let us leave Birmingham now and bring this home into your world, the one you are sitting in, because that is the only reason this story is worth telling at all. We are trained, all of us, to watch the dangerous men. The strong man, the boss, the loud figure at the front who threatens and shouts and holds the visible power. We are trained to fear him and to fight him, and while we are watching him, the real power sits exactly where it has always sat, in the quiet rooms, behind the banks, inside the systems, in the hands of gentlemen who never raise their voices, because they have never needed to. The Shelbys spent a decade bleeding against the men who were pointed at them, and never once reached the hand doing the pointing. That is not a story about 1920s Birmingham. That is a description of how power protects itself in every age, including yours. And here is the uncomfortable gift that Ada offers you. The person in any system who understands it best is almost never the person at the top. It is the clerk, the nurse, the teacher, the assistant, the ordinary worker who processes the machinery of power and is assumed to be too small to notice what passes through their hands. The powerful survive by being watched by the wrong people, by the ones who want their game, and by being invisible to the ones who could actually name them. Ada was lethal not because she was strong, but because she could see, and because she refused to fight the way the machine wanted her to fight. So the real question this story leaves you with is not about the Shelbys at all. It is this: in your own world, are you watching the loud, dangerous men at the front? Or have you learned to look at the quiet hands behind them? Because the powerful have never truly feared the people who want to fight them on their own terms. The one thing they have always feared, in every century, is an ordinary person who suddenly sees clearly how the machine actually works, and who has the discipline not to pick up the machine's own weapons. Ada Shelby was the least of the Shelbys, the sister, the widow, the reader. They all indulged and none of them respected. And she was the only one who could have won, because she was the only one who understood that you cannot shoot a system. You can only make people see it. Remember that the next time you are told to fear the loud man at the front. Ask who taught you to look at him. And ask what he is standing in front of. Because the most dangerous person in any room full of power has never been the one holding the gun. It has always, always been the quiet one in the corner, the one nobody thought to watch, who has just finished reading the ledger and understood exactly what it says. If this is the kind of story you came for, the ones that take the world of the Shelbys apart and find something true underneath, then watch this next. What if the one death that broke the Shelby family had never happened at all, and the man they lost had lived to see everything Tommy built? That story is waiting for you now. Because in the end, every Shelby story is really a question about the same thing. Who holds the power, who pays the price, and who quietly, in the corner, Unwatched finally understands the difference.